Well, you can certainly see the dirt coming off here. The leatherette on the base is quite dull looking. It's lost all its shine. So the problem here is partly dirt, but it's also lost its finish. The plastic seems to have lost its shiny finish. First order of the day is get all that ingrained dust and grime off there. See how we're doing. Yeah, that looks a lot better. This is looking better too. We'll just give that another little go over. I'm surprised at the amount of dirt that's coming off this. You'd think it would all come loose on the first pass, but it doesn't seem to. This piece is much cleaner by comparison. Once more, then I'm going to dry all this off with a hairdryer, leave it to sit for an hour or so, then I'm going to come back and polish that up with a bit of wax polish. Right, anyway, it's lunchtime. Well, a bit of cleaning and a bit of polish and so forth, and those leatherettes look good. So I'm going to put on my Film Advance lever on the bottom, put the back catch cover and things in place, then put the... What have I got to do then? I've got to put the patch on here. And then that's the body just about finished with. I can turn my attention to dealing with that lens. And I'm not expecting any great problem with that. I think it was just sticky with the same dried grease problems as the shutter control rings had. And nothing much more than that. So the back catch release cover. See if I can get this assembled. This was quite gummy with glue that had been squeezed out into it from whenever this thing had been assembled. Of course, there shouldn't have been any glue in there at all. It was just that the whoever assembled the camera had splashed the glue around like nobody's business. This doesn't want to go into place because the spring is a bit mutilated. And the spring is a bit mutilated because someone made a mess of installing it. It's not easy to get these in place, and once they've been mutilated, it's a lot harder. So the end of the spring is the coil is pretty much tipped on its side, so it doesn't want to sit in position correctly. These are awkward on a good day. This is obviously not a good day. It's worse than awkward. I think that went on without slipping out of place. We'll find out when I do that screw up. It's looking hopeful. That's good. That went correctly. I was able to bend the end of the spring back more or less in line with where it should have been. That's that done. So what are we short? We're short the leatherette patch on the base of the advance lever. And I should have the original one here somewhere. I think the camera came with one. Here I've got the focus mount of the lens apart, and I'm just cleaning it. The focus mount was not the source of our problems. This problem with this lens was that the aperture setting control on the lens was seized up. It was almost certainly gummed up with dried grease. I didn't see any obvious physical problem apart from that, and I expect that when I reassemble it after it's all cleaned, that everything shall work normally. However, we'll find out. Perhaps there was some mechanical fault which I didn't spot. We'll soon know if it doesn't work. So I'm just cleaning all these components carefully to get rid of all the old grease and all the trapped dirt and dust that grease may hold. I'll be using a little bit of molybdenum paste in here, and that's probably all it will require in this section. This would have had some graphite grease or similar when it was assembled, and that grease will have the remnants of it will still be here. You have to be fairly cautious about cleaning the outside of these, the name rings with the scales on and so forth. If you use an aggressive solvent there, it will just lift that printing off, which is only screen printed on, I would think. Certainly not engraved. I'll just check the feel of this dry and see if it's... I'm just holding these together lightly. I'm just checking in case I feel any grittiness. That all feels good. I've got to clean the other screws and these little wedges that hold these sections together, and then I can assemble that with a little bit of molybdenum paste. These are covered in some green finish. It's some low friction surface, some predecessor to Teflon, I would imagine. And all I'm doing here is just lifting off the old grease. I was quite happy with the feel of those components. I think I can assemble those together. First I've got to come back with a battery for this camera. Right. So I want to apply a little bit of molybdenum paste to this groove in here that those retaining wedges run into, and some on that front face that comes into contact with that body on occasion, by the looks of it. I've left one of those wedges in place. It's the one with the post on there instead of a screw. It's awkward getting that out, so I don't bother. I'll leave that there. I'll push that one back out of the way. It's got to go underneath that brass separator which keeps the spring from locking into the mechanism. Now I'm just checking that I've got this in the correct position. That's good. Now since we didn't disturb that one there, so I'll put the wedge in opposite it and position that so that it holds the lens, holds the section securely, but isn't too stiff to move. It should be smooth to move, but there should be no rattle. And you control that by how much you push these wedges inwards. So I'm just checking the feel of that. That's smooth, and I'm checking for rattle. That's quite good. I'll do that screw up and check again. There's a slight feel of resistance there, nothing bad at all, and certainly no rattle, so I'm inclined to think that's okay. I'm just checking to make sure that is square. It was a little bit off square. As soon as I squared it up, it freed up slightly. There's no feeling of stiffness to it. I'll get the next one in place. This is the pair at 90 degrees to those those other two. So I'll put that one loosely in place and the one on the opposite side. And I'll go through the same business. I will adjust the position of those wedges inwards or outwards to make sure that the lens mount is firm but it moves smoothly. And I'm checking for rattle. That seems good. There's a slight bit more drag than I would expect. Back that side off slightly. That's freed up. That's good. I'm happy with the state of that. And from there we can build up the rest of the mechanism. Of course, I've normally have these components carefully lined up where nothing gets disturbed, so I can put them all back in sequence. Since I didn't work like that, they are not sitting anywhere neatly organised in sequence, and I'm going to have to put them in one at a time from memory. It's lucky I've got a fair idea where everything goes. So that fine spring goes on there. The first of the depth of field pointers. Now that's got some quite sticky, dirty looking grease on the back of it. These are broad flat surfaces. If they have anything like an oil or a grease on there, they'll tend to stick to each other, and because these parts have to counter rotate, you get quite a lot of resistance. That looks alright now. Drop that into position. That couples with these little pinion gears here. That should drop down to the bottom pinion. That's better. I'll need to hook its return spring over the little hook on there. That's good. We have a separator. This little separator keeps the parts away from each other. It also provides a path for the return springs to run around the outside. The design of this changed with various models of lenses over time, presumably as they tried to improve the action of things. There's a little tiny brass tab here that lines up with that slot and make sure this spring is not trapped underneath that separator. That's good. Just gathering some more parts here. The depth of field pointer, this is the other one. Again, like the first one, it's quite dirty looking. Got quite a lot of dirt on it, or grease. I want all that off. You can see how it comes off on the cotton bud, there's quite a bit there. This is the setting lever for it, for those depth of field pointers. Again, broad flat surfaces I tend to stick if there's any significant amount of oil or grease, particularly sticky old dried grease. So I need to make sure that's all clean. And these two components couple with a little tiny lever which has to run up this track here and makes some slight adjustments to positions as it swings across. And it's an awkward little bugger. Let's get that in there. The depth of field pointer. Get this around the right way. Drops in there. Has to pick up that pin on that little arm. It's doing its best not to. That's better, it's in place. We've got to get it round on the pinion so that it's right at the end of its travel like its mate, because these two are linked like that and like that. That all looks good. See nothing way out there, just bring you in a bit. This piece, that pin has to drop into that tiny hole there. And the spring hooks back over that post that the first spring is also on. So that sits there like that. That's good, they appear to counter rotate. It looks good. I'm going to, what have we got next? Two pieces. I'm stopping right here because I want to prepare this piece for assembly next. This is the cam that would couple to the rangefinder on a 3S camera. It's, of course, this isn't going on a Retina 3S camera, but this cam assembly is very stiff, which probably means it's sticky with old grease. I've got to get all of that off. That needs to move smoothly because it's coupled to the focus, and if it's stiff to move, the focus will be stiff to move. And we don't want that. Brass pieces like this sometimes tarnish up where they've been in a corrosive environment, perhaps a bit of moisture, anything to do with salt water of course, and then the brass tarnishes on the surface, then it's very rough. You get a great deal of friction with it. That's quite dirty in there. It's obviously a lot of ingrained dust, I would think. Let's clean this mount up. I'll check the feel of this brass ring. No, it moves quite smoothly. That's good. I'll put a smear of molybdenum on that, on the outside face. On that inner face, it doesn't need much. It's just to make sure there's no high friction area, and on that cam surface where it's to contact the pin on a Retina 3S camera, That should be more than sufficient. That's nice and smooth now. And it's little retainers. You have 3 of these little retainers, each with their screw. As soon as I've got this done, I can clean those last 2 remaining components, and I've got to find the headless screws I use to as an alignment guide when I'm putting the lens together, or this mount together. The holes in these little retainer bracket things is very close to the size of the screw diameter, so it's difficult to get your screw through them and started sometimes. As you're trying to get the screw through the retainer and lined up with the hole in the mount below it. And the screws are short, and they've quite a wide head for their size, so they're inclined to tip over. They won't stand up easily when you're trying to screw them up. Keep wanting to lie on their sides. That's better, got that started. Check those 3 screws are tight, and check the action of that ring. That's nice and smooth now, that's good. These 2 components I need to clean because I can see it is a bit dirty looking. This is just a shim. On some later lenses they dispensed with it completely. And this piece is the setting lever, and this setting lever here does what? Well, this is the one that opens the aperture right up to full aperture, I believe. Right, that's those components. Where's these wee screws that I need? One, 2, 3. And these I just put through the holes on the lens here as a guide, so that I can lower the other piece over it and get it correctly positioned without disturbing the mechanism, these levers and so forth below, because they're easily displaced, which causes you endless grief. If they get displaced, then you've got to pull everything apart and put them back together. So that shim just goes on there like that. This lever goes on here like that. There's a fork here, a little tab that gets from the focus, from the front of the focus ring, which needs to couple to to this point here on that brass ring. So I need to get that lined up somewhere I can find it, and I normally choose to line it up that's roughly in the direction of that screw hole, because it's easy to see what I'm doing. And I'm going to lower this over those alignment screws, get that focus thing in place. That lever won't move. That lever that was jamming things to start off with is still jamming things. So something is not right. Okay, so we got all our parts clean, but it didn't fix the problem for us. So there is some physical problem other than just grease. At least we've got all the parts clean now. I can rule out the action of grease and filth and look for another cause. It does move, but it's very, very stiff. Okay, let's pull these pieces out one by one to find out what's going on. If this pin is bent, that will certainly do that. It doesn't look bent. I'm going to take out that little lever arrangement and check the action to see if these things counter rotate. They're quite stiff. Let's take out this one. I'm looking for any distortion in it, particularly if the pointer was bent and rubbing on the case or something of that nature. I don't really notice anything there. I've just got one pointer in there at the moment, so there's no counter rotation involved. It seems a bit sticky and reluctant to move. So there may be some roughness here somewhere. Let's take off our little dividing ring. I'll take out this pointer and have a look at it. And I'm looking at the ring side on, edge on if you like. I don't know that that's dead flat. Let's see if the other ring will rotate freely by itself. There doesn't seem to be any problem with the pinions. They certainly seem to move. Okay, that's not going to tell me anything because I need it a little bit higher to clear the first pinion. I'll put that first one in place. Put the spacer in. Put the second one in place. Certainly stiffer than I'd expect it to be. I wonder whether these pinion shafts is bent or something. Something's rubbing on something, I think. I'll get back to you when I find out what's going on. So, the camera's finished. So in the wash-up stage here, we'll just go over what I discovered, what was bad, what I fixed. So, as I may have mentioned earlier, the camera had been serviced previously. It had a sticker in the back saying it had been serviced. That sticker probably dates from, I would think, late 60s, early 70s. The reflex body. I made some notes about the condition of the camera before I started. And what I found at the time was this. I wrote down that the general condition is good, the chrome is good, the meter window's uncracked, there's ice bumps on the back, less obvious on the front and base. Leatherettes appear dry and may crack when removed. The meter setting wheel jammed, although the cord appears to be present. The meter moves slightly in each direction when attempting to rotate the setting wheel. Meter responds to light. Shutter and aperture setting rings counter-rotate through the aperture range, but no further. Film advance works and the shutter cocks. The shutter blades can be encouraged to close down on release, but the shutter does not fire. The cocking rack and transfer cam are probably undamaged. Cannot see through the finder. The mirror is jammed down below the normal stop position, probably has been forced by someone pushing it through the open shutter. A large fingerprint visible on the screen, probably matches one on the mirror. Record print and send to Interpol for identification of the guilty party. Capping plate descends but does not latch and swings back up into contact with the rear of the jammed mirror. The Xenar lens. Focus moves okay. Aperture opening tab on the back of lens works normally. Depth of field tab jammed. And then we get to the things I found wrong once I'd taken the camera apart. The leatherettes on the front did in fact crack. One came off in pieces. All have now been replaced. The spring for the meter setting button on the top of the camera was not correct. It was too small in diameter and much too short to be useful. The spring for the capping plate catch was not present. It's difficult to see how it could escape by itself. It must have been left out by the previous repairer. The tape patches on the finder assembly were missing. A spring holding part of the mirror and capping plate interlock was unhooked. 2 shim washers missing from mechanism at the back of the shutter. Springs throughout the camera were modified in shape, but the detent blade actuating ring, the spring on the detent on the blade actuating ring was so bent out of shape it needed to be replaced. The pin on the blade actuating ring that opens the shutter for viewing was loose, and so that the actuating ring needed a replacement too. The fingerprint on the focus screen was not on the underside of the screen as expected, but on the top side. Someone must have removed the prism, removed the condenser lenses and put their finger on the screen. That's just weird. The reflex mirror was bad beyond usefulness and has been replaced. And the problem with the lens mechanism, that just about drove me mad. In the final analysis, one of the 2 depth of field pointers was slightly bent, causing it to bind. Since I'm busy blaming the previous repairer, we'll blame them for that too. Perhaps they pushed on one of the pointers in an attempt to remedy some perceived problem. So, this has been a marathon, but now here I have a good working Retina Reflex S camera. The leatherettes look good. That's a replacement back, of course. Replacement leatherettes either side of the front and on the base. So even though they were a bit old and ratty and dirty looking, they've cleaned up well, and this camera can go back to its owner. So Retina Reflex cameras are not usually quite such a marathon to service. This one had a variety of problems, some of which I haven't seen before, but that's life, I suppose. But the main thing is it's good to go, and I'm pleased to have the job finished. Thanks for watching.